Hey, welcome again to the next chapter of this book, The New 1 Minute Manager. And the next part is the second secret 1 minute praisings. As the young man left Teresa's office, he was struck by the simplicity of what he had heard. He thought it makes sense. After all, how can you be an effective manager unless you and your team are clear about goals and what good performance looks like? When he got to Paul Trennell's office, he was surprised to meet someone so young. Paul was in his late 20s or early 30s. So you have been to see our manager. He's quite a guy, isn't he? The young man was already getting used to the manager being called quite a guy. I guess he is. Did he tell you about how he manages? He did. Is it true? Asked the young man, wondering if he would get a different answer from Teresa's. It sure is. My boss at the last place I worked was a micromanager, but our new 1 minute manager doesn't believe in that style. You mean you don't get help from him? Not as much as I did when I was first learning. He trusts me more now. However, he spends a good amount of time with me at the beginning of a new project or responsibility. Yes, I just learned about setting 1 minute goals, interjected the young man. Actually, I wasn't thinking about 1 minute goals. I was referring to 1 minute praisings. 1 minute praisings? Is that the second secret? Yes, in fact, when I first started to work here, my manager made it very clear to me what he was going to do. What was that? He said it would be a lot easier for me to do well if he gave me crystal clear feedback on how I was doing. He said it would help me succeed, that I had talent and he wanted to keep me. He also wanted me to enjoy my work and to be a big help to the organization. Then he said he would let me know in very specific terms when I was doing well and when I wasn't. He cautioned me that I might not be very comfortable at first for either of us. Why? Because, as he pointed out to me then, most managers don't manage that way. He assured me that if succeeding in my job was important to me, I would soon realize that feedback is an invaluable tool. Can you give me an example of what you are talking about? Sure. When I started working here, I noticed that after my manager and I set our 1 minute goals, he stayed in close contact. How did he do that? Two ways. First, he observed my activities even if he was far away. He would look at various data that showed how I was doing. Second, he required me to send him reports of my progress. How did you feel about that? At first, it was unsettling. Then I recalled that he had said he would be watching me in the beginning in order to catch me doing something right. Wait, catch you doing something right? Yes, we have a saying around here that every manager lives by: help people reach their full potential, catch them doing something right. The young man had never heard of a manager doing that, even though he had met many managers. Paul continued, in most organizations, the managers spend most of their time catching people doing what? The young man smiled knowingly and said, doing something wrong. Right. No pun intended. Here we put the accent on the positive by catching people doing something right, especially as they begin a new task. The young man made a few notes, then glanced up and asked, so, what happens when he catches you doing something right? That's when he gives a 1 minute praising, Paul said with delight. What does that mean? When he notices you have done something right, he tells you precisely what you did right and how good he feels about it. He pauses for a moment so you can feel it too. Then he reinforces the praise by encouraging you to keep up the good work. I don't think I have ever heard of a manager doing that. That must make you feel pretty good. It certainly does, and for several reasons. First, I get a praising soon after I have done something right. Paul leaned forward and confided, I don't have to wait for a performance review, if you know what I mean. I know, the young man said. It's awful to have to wait to know how you are doing. I agree. Second, since he specifies exactly what I did right, I know he knows what I am doing and is sincere. Third, he is consistent. Consistent? Yes, he praises me when I am doing my job well and deserves it, even if things are not going well for him personally or here at work. I know he may be annoyed about things happening elsewhere, but he responds to where I am, not just to where he is at the time. I really appreciate that. Doesn't all this praising take up a lot of the manager's time? The young man asked. No, remember, you don't have to praise someone for very long for that person to know you notice how they are doing. It usually takes less than a minute. And that's why it's called a 1 minute praising? Right. So is he always trying to catch you doing something right? No, of course not. Paul answered. It's mostly in the beginning, when you start working here and when you begin a new project or responsibility. After you get to know the ropes, you know how he has confidence in you because later on you don't see him that often. Really? Isn't that a letdown after all the attention? Not really, because you and he have other ways of knowing when your job performance is praiseworthy. You both can review the data that has been posted, sales figures, expenditures, production schedules, and so on. In time, you begin to catch yourself doing things right. You start praising yourself. You wonder when he might praise you again, which he sometimes does, and that keeps you going even when he is not around. It's uncanny. I have never worked so hard at a job in my life or enjoyed it so much. Here is why. I know when I get a praising, I have earned it. I have seen how it builds confidence, which turns out to be very important. Why do you think that is so important? Because confidence that is earned helps you deal with all the changes that are occurring. We are expected to be confident enough to innovate in order to stay ahead. Is that why your manager gives you the opportunity to solve a problem yourself rather than participating in your decision? Yes, and plus, it saves the manager's time. I do the same with the people on my team. So they too become more capable. Well, I am beginning to see a pattern here. You connect 1 minute goals to praisings, which brings out the best in people. Exactly. Could you give me a moment to make some notes about how to use 1 minute praisings? Certainly, Paul said. The young man wrote 1 minute praisings summary. A 1 minute praising works very well when you, in the first half of the minute, praise people as soon as possible. Let people know what they did right, being specific, and tell people how good you feel about what they did right and how it helps. Then take a pause for a moment to allow people time to feel good about what they have done. And in the second half of the minute, encourage them to do more of the same. Make it clear you have confidence in them and support their success. So, if 1 minute goals and praisings are the first and second secrets, may I ask what the third secret is? Paul rose from his chair. Maybe you would like to ask John Levy that. I understand you are planning to talk with him next. Yes, I am. I want to thank you so much for your time. That's okay. Time is one thing I have more of. You see, I'm becoming a new 1 minute manager myself. The visitor nodded. This was not the first time he had heard that in this organization. He left the building and took a walk among the trees nearby to think about what he was discovering. He was struck again by the common sense and simplicity of what he had heard. How can you argue with the effectiveness of catching people doing something right? The young man thought, isn't that what everyone would like to experience? But do 1 minute praisings really work? Does this 1 minute management stuff really get bottom line results? As he walked along, his curiosity about results increased. So he returned to the manager's assistant and asked if it would be possible to reschedule his appointment with John Levy for sometime the next morning. He explained that before he talked to John, He wanted to speak with someone who would have information on all the different divisions in the company. John says, "Tomorrow morning is fine," Courtney said as she hung up the phone. Then she called downtown and made the new appointment the young man had requested. He was to see Liz Aquino. Courtney said, "I'm confident she will be able to give you the data you are looking for." He thanked her and, feeling hungry, went across the street to have something to eat and to prepare for his next morning. The appraisal. After lunch, the young man went downtown and met with Liz Aquino. Following a polite discussion about why he was there, he got down to business by asking, "Based on the data you have, what is the best managed of all your operations in the company?" A moment later, he laughed as he heard Liz say, "You won't have to look very far because it is the new 1 minute managers. His operation is the most efficient and effective of all of our facilities, and it's been that way for years. No matter how things change, he adapts. He's quite a guy, isn't he?" "Remarkable," said the young man. "Does he have the best equipment and technology?" "No. In fact, he's got some of the oldest." "Well, he can't be perfect," said the young man, still puzzled by the new 1 minute manager's style. "Does he have much turnover?" "Come to think of it, he does have turnover. People do leave his division." "Aha," the young man said, thinking he was onto something. "What happens after they leave the new 1 minute manager?" "We usually give them their own operation. He is our best developer of people. Whenever we have an opening and need a good manager, we call him. He always has somebody who is ready." Fascinated, he thanked Liz for her time, but this time he got a different response. "I was glad I could fit you in today," she said. "The rest of my week is really jammed. I wish I knew how he continues to do it. I have been meaning to go over there and see him, but I just haven't had time." Smiling, the young man said, "I will give you his secrets as a gift when I find them out myself, just like he is sharing them with me." "That would be a precious present," Liz said with a smile. She looked at her cluttered office and sighed. "I could use whatever help I can get." He left Liz's office and walked out of the building. Shaking his head, the manager was absolutely fascinating to him. That night, the young man had a very restless sleep, thinking about the next day, about learning the third secret.